In our last segment, I was talking about the church liturgy. Well, that concludes the first 800 years of the medieval period. At the end of the medieval period, there are two small subsections, and I wanted to talk about the different things that come about during these sections with you now. The first one is called the Ars Antiqua, or the Old Art, and this period is from 1150 to 1300. And there's a very important discovery that's made during the Ars Antiqua. There are two composers who are working back to back at a particular location in France. We go to the city of Paris and we go to the Notre Dame Cathedral. Whenever you have composers living at the same time and working together, or in this case, back to back at the same place, sometimes they're lumped together and referred to as a school. So these two composers are often referred to as the School of Notre Dame. Their importance within the history of music is that they discover a new texture, or they invent a new texture. So for this last 800 years, we have been with Gregorian chant and singing it monophonically, just the one line of music, a cappella. Now we're going to go into polyphony, and this is how it evolves. The first composer in the School of Notre Dame is Leonin. Leonin develops the first form of polyphony, and that is called organum. Organum takes an already existing chant melody. Then Leonin developed and composed a new melody and put them together. So here's our first musical theft. I am now old enough to hear contemporary music that's using old 70s or 80s rhythms or melodies in a new, fresh way and a new composition. Well, there's a reason, though, Leonin stole an old tune to create his new form. The church felt that if you were going to create anything new, then it needed to be grounded in the old. It had to have some sort of connection to the church's past. So knowing that, Leonin is borrowing, let's say, an old Kyrie eleison melody. Then he's creating another melody. So he's taking his choir and he's going to subdivide them into two sections. One will sing the old and one will sing his new melody. Put them together and you have polyphony. Now this isn't the true textbook definition of polyphony, though. We have two melodies but no harmony. And that's potentially why organum really didn't work very well. Organum is rather short-lived. The example that comes with the book is just so awful to our ears. And one of the reasons why is, remember what we were going through with the ebb and flow of the first 800 years. We were becoming more and more elaborate with our vocal line. That's what's continuing here. We take an old chant and we take a new melody, and that new melody is extremely melismatic. The book provides for us just an excerpt of the organum, where all that is sung is 3 syllables. And those 3 syllables, it takes a minute and a half to sing those, because each syllable is decorated, has such a huge melisma. And so what Leonin did with his organum concept is he made the Mass become sometimes triple and quadruple in size. And remember that they're saying the Mass every 3 hours of the day. So that really just did not work for a time constraint, because people had chores and other responsibilities that they had to take care of. So the person that follows Leonin, his name is Perotin. And Perotin kind of cleans everything up. Perotin develops the most important form of polyphony, called the motet. The word in the French language for text or word is MOT. And so that's something to remember as we go through this idea of the new form, the motet. Anything new had to be grounded in the old. So Perotin takes a segment, an excerpt of Leonin's organum, and then he's going to write one new line to go along with that. So now what happens is the borrowed chant that Leonin used for his organum, that is still present, but now that's going to be dropped to a harmony line. The new line that Leonin composed is, he's just going to take just a little bit of that because he doesn't need it all. He's going to have that present, and he's going to have one text sung to that line. Now Perotin writes his new text, and we're starting to think about some organizations of rhythm now, because we want to begin and end at the same time. So Perotin is going to mimic the length of Leonin's excerpted passage that he has, but he's going to put a different text to his melody. So we're going to have two melodies, Leonin's melody, Perotin's melody, the Kyrie eleison, and let's say the Gloria with this one. And they're all going to be undergirded by a harmony line, which is an old chant. Put it all together and you have the motet. So you're killing two birds with one stone. You're singing two prayers simultaneously. Even if you have been going to the Roman Catholic Church all your life, if you're a Latin scholar, it would be hard to meditate and pray with this particular composition, two at the same time. But that was what Perotin discovered. So where the Mass used to be, let's say 30 minutes with the monophonic chant, then it was made to be 2 hours long with the organum. Perotin's concept is he's trying to get it back to 30 minutes, and then he thinks, no, let's decrease it. Let's get out to the corner bistro before the other churches. So he makes the Mass 15 minutes long by combining texts into one piece. Now this is the original concept of the motet. When we move forward, certain composers are going to think, I don't want to use two different texts with my different melodies. So we're going to have a path of certain composers. They're going to follow this original concept of the motet, while others are going to write motets but only use one text. It's still, to our ears, going to sound like multiple lines of text, because the different melodies, the different parts are not going to line up and sing the same words at the same time, like we're very used to today. So I hope that this isn't confusing. What happens is we start with the Gregorian chant. Leonin comes along, the first composer of the School of Notre Dame, and he adds another line of music to that existing chant. Then Perotin comes along, and we're going to have 3 lines of music. The existing chant is now the harmony. We have Leonin's melody, and then we have Perotin on top of it. So we're just adding 1 line of music each time. Perotin's music, you're going to have to take your choir and subdivide it into 3 different parts in order to perform it. So that's what happens in the Ars Antiqua. The School of Notre Dame develops the new texture, polyphony. Now that we're with this new texture, composers are going to keep at it. The final century of the medieval period is called the Ars Nova, or the New Art. And during the New Art, we discover one particular composer, Guillaume de Machaut. Machaut is sometimes recognized as being the greatest composer of the medieval period. He certainly is the greatest from the Ars Nova. Machaut was born sometime around the turn of the century, sometime around 1300, and he passed away in 1377. He was brought up in the church, actually felt a higher calling to become a priest, and he did, but as he was growing up, he also was a big lover of music. Music actually became more of his love, and so he stepped down from priesthood and just focused on his music. And he composed the greatest composition from the medieval period, and it is called the Messe de Notre Dame, or the Mass of Our Lady. Why is it so great? It shows a continuation of what we left off with the School of Notre Dame. The Mass of Our Lady is a 4-part polyphonic setting, meaning you have to have 4 sections within your choir to sing it. So We started off with monophony. We went to 2 parts with the organum, then 3 parts with Perotin's motet. Now we are at a 4-part polyphonic setting. So in an all-male choir situation, we would have had 2 tenors and 2 basses in order to perform this. But the biggest reason why the Mass of Our Lady is so important is that for the first time, someone viewed the Mass as a whole composition, as a whole unit by itself. Prior to Machaut, people would create a new Gloria, a new Credo. If you were around with Perotin, then you would take the Kyrie and the Gloria and put it together. But normally you were just working with one individual prayer. But Machaut thought, we have this particular holiday, we have this particular celebration coming up in a month's time. I want to create a piece of music where the Kyrie is going to naturally flow into the Gloria and so on and so forth, so that you see some sort of connection and somehow it's now made into one unit. So this is just a mindset change, but it's an important development because after Machaut, people are now going to create a whole new Mass. They're not going to bother with just creating one particular prayer. Machaut, though, dabbled in other things. Later in his life, he was also known as a troubadour. So he was creating music for the secular world. He was creating chansons, French love songs, for weddings, for just popular everyday occasions, non-church events, in other words. And sometimes he would have a great hit on his hands and he would weave that popular melody into a new Mass that he was working on. So Machaut started crossing over, one of our first crossover artists. And the church did not care for this. They wanted their music to be just theirs. They never wanted their music to be heard outside of the church. They certainly didn't want everyday secular music being brought in. But Machaut went both directions with his melodies until he was shown the door. And the later part of his life, he was solely a troubadour, a trained musician who was creating secular songs. So take a moment and go and listen to some of the music of Machaut. It's very interesting. The secular music is a little bit more dissonant to the ears than the music of for the Roman Catholic Church, and the music of his sacred music, his Mass music, because it has to be much more consonant for that setting. But before we finish the medieval period, I wanted to talk about another type of singer that was around. Of course, many of you have probably heard of these troubadours or trouvères or minor singers that are in the Germanic-speaking countries. But there was one scoundrel, one musical scoundrel that's very interesting. That was called the jongleur. A jongleur was someone that you knew to have a very good voice in your Roman Catholic Church choir. And you were also available for moonlighting or available for hire outside of the church. Let's say there were 2 ladies in Paris, France during the 1350s. And they were very aristocratic, very well-to-do ladies. And they were best friends. One of them found out that the other's husband was having a dalliance with the town courtesan or the town prostitute. Well, it would not be in your ladylike fashion to go to said friend and say, hey, your husband's fooling around with the town hooker, you might want to do something about it. So you would have to tell your friend so that she would find out while keeping your hands very clean. And this is how you would do it. After one service, you would find the jongleur, one of the members of the choir, and you would say, how much would it cost me to hire you for you to go and sing outside of my friend's home and tell her this information? Well, what he would do is give her the quote and she would pay it, and then he would go outside, throw some rocks at her window and sing her a little ditty. But what music did they know? The music that they knew the best was the sacred music used in the Mass. So they would take away the Gloria, they would take away the Credo, and then they would insert this National Enquirer text. And they would sing this, again, in the French language. They would sing it in their vernacular, their everyday language. They would sing this news to the friend, and then the friend would know, and she could handle the situation however she wanted to. And the friend could just sit back and watch the show, basically, and find out how everything was going to turn out. But the friend never had to know that she knew that information as well. So a lot of things were happening like that during the day, and the church was very irritated by this. Of course, they did not want their originally sacred melodies that were used for their mass to be taken out to the street in that manner. And so there's a lot of crossing over that happens. And then in the Renaissance, all that's going to kind of boil to a head, and the church is going to rise up against that with a committee, with a group that's called the Council of Trent. So we'll learn a little bit more about that in the Renaissance. But that concludes all the information that you need for the medieval period. Your first test is going to cover the materials and music, the medieval period, and this next section, the Renaissance. So we have a couple more lectures for the Renaissance.